Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mamluks podcast. My name is Sim. Along with me is a guest, no co-host today, just a guest. His name is Muhi Khwaja. Muhi, welcome to the show. Say salam to the listeners.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Such an honor to be here. Thank you, Sim, for hosting.
Muhi is one of the co-founders of the American Muslim Fund, and Muhi's on here because I thought his project is super interesting, and I thought, he's not paying us or anything like that. It's not a sponsored episode or anything. I just thought that what he's doing is really cool, and I've always been talking to you guys about ways that Muslims can utilize their skills, whatever they've acquired through education or the professional world, and put it towards, their Muslim community, and somehow bring a marriage of both arenas together. So, Muhi, welcome to the show. That's a very unique name, by the way. Muhi, where's that from?
So short for Muhyiddin.
I feel dumb now.
No, it's okay.
Muhyiddin. Okay. Nice. And you're ethnically...
So my parents were both born in India. Father's from Lucknow, and my mother's from Hyderabad.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Straight up brown guy.
Exactly. Born and raised in the streets of Detroit.
Okay.
And, I like what you said about using our skills to kind of benefit the community, right?
Yeah.
We're here in the studio because you have this affinity for this type of medium, and you are bringing a voice from the Muslim community to the general public, and I think that's really amazing what you're doing. And each and every one of us, I feel like, has a purpose, right? It's our duty to kind of find that calling and our ways to serve God in a unique way, right?
Yeah.
And I myself am very fortunate to have these experiences in my life that have brought me to this point. And I'm very excited to kind of go into that about how we started American Muslim Fund, why we started it, and more so just about my background and everything like that.
Yeah, let's start off with your background. And you started in what field? What was your education like?
Man, just like every good Desi boy, I was going to be a mechanical engineer, right?
Oh wow!
But
I didn't know a lot of Desi boys going to mechanical engineering, but usually it's IT or being a doctor.
Sure, those are the callings.
But
right?
yeah, back in my parents' days, engineering was pretty hot.
Sure.
Yeah.
My dad himself was a metallurgical engineer for Ford for 30 years.
Gotcha.
And I'm the youngest of four siblings, each of which, had promises to go into the medical field, but didn't. So I was kind of the last saving grace. One of my brothers is a physician assistant, so he was like the closest to that. 3 years into undergrad at the University of Michigan Dearborn, I just kind of wasn't in love with what I was doing. And if you remember back in 2007, there was the auto industry crash, and just things weren't good, and I couldn't even keep a job as like an intern in the engineering field. So I really took that time to really assess, like, what do I want to do with my career and what am I passionate about? And it brought me back to like growing up in the Muslim community. As part of the youth group, everything like that, we would always do these events and fundraisers for like Islamic relief, right?
Yeah.
And I vividly remember like Anwar Khan coming to our mosque, who was the previous CEO of Islamic Relief, and talking to the community about like purchasing a hospital in Palestine and an ambulance in Palestine to help people there, right? Or doing water projects in Africa. And those things stuck with me from back then, and I always was passionate about helping other people because of that. So there was an opportunity at the University of Michigan to be part of what was called the Development Summer Internship Program. And I got to see firsthand how the university fundraised. So looking at their alumni, looking at their hospital, looking at the sports teams, looking just at the university in general. They had 500 staff members just to fundraise for the university. So it was a really eye-opening experience where I learned the ins and outs and best practices of this industry. So I graduated with a degree in history and psychology, not necessarily knowing what I wanted to do, but this internship solidified this path as a career.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in psychology, so how were you able to pull any education from that might have helped you, or
I think definitely in terms of like relationship building and understanding communication styles, it was
yeah.
definitely really relevant.
Okay. Okay. So and then you moved on to what from there?
Yeah, so right out of undergrad, I had a mentor who actually told me about this internship, and his name is Farhan Latif. And he helped told me about a organization called the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. ISPU does research on the American Muslim community, and I was their first full-time hire for fundraising. And the profession itself is called development. So I was their development associate and helping with best practices of trying to get more monthly donors,
Yeah.
creating a client relationship management tool to kind of keep track of our donor database, some grant writing, events. Our community loves throwing events, right?
Yeah.
But how can we make them more efficient? How can we make them less of a lock the door and let's fundraise and hit this goal without any strategy? So how can we bring the best practices to the Muslim community to better fundraise for our nonprofits that we care about and love?
All right. So you got into the experience of raising money and finding out the challenges behind that from your time. Well, now you were full time. Were you employed by ISPU at this time? No.
Exactly. Yeah. So, out of undergrad, I had some relevant nonprofit and leadership experiences in undergrad. Like I was the president of our Amnesty International chapter. I was also student body president. I had played rugby at the university. So all of these like leadership type of roles,
Right.
meshed really well with this type of nonprofit work as well. And ISP was my full-time job. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And that's where like Dali Mocha had and them they
Yeah,
work, right? Yeah.
totally. So this is back 2010 to 2012. And back then it was a really small team, but still doing really impactful work. And just the profile of ISPU has really grown in the last decade as well, especially with Dahlia joining and so many other great people at the organization.
Yeah. And what would you say is probably the biggest takeaway from there in terms of bringing funds to a community and a lot of the challenges related to that?
Yeah, so I think, every nonprofit organization in the United States probably faces these similar issues of like staff retention,
Yeah.
board leadership, and fundraising, right?
Yeah.
And the Muslim community is no different. But I think it's a very unique subset.
Yeah.
There's over 1 million nonprofit organizations in the United States. And it's said that there are at least 7,500 Muslim organizations in the United States. And a majority of them have a budget of less than $250,000. They have less than 2 full-time staff. So it's challenging to kind of do everything in the best way when you have limited resources, right? So I think some of the challenges and some of the things that we did really well at ISPU was like creating community host committees so that we could still travel across the country, but have dedicated people who would help us organize boots on the ground, right? And they did a lot of house parties instead of doing like these lavish big banquets.
Yeah.
They would actually go into the homes of community members who would talk about the projects that they were working on and why they found it interesting. And it was really more peer-to-peer relationship building, right?
Okay.
So I think that was something really that ISP did really well.
It works great for selling cosmetics to to women. I don't know.
Exactly.
The people who are listening internationally have no idea what we're talking about, but a lot of ladies over here, they have these little businesses where they go to people's home and sell cosmetics. But anyway, no, that is a great strategy because I didn't think about that because you could just you don't necessarily need to have a big banquet hall to raise funds, and that you have to calculate all the expenses that go into setting up a
Exactly.
banquet hall and then
Right.
subtracting all that from the actual margin.
And
It's,
the staff time
yeah.
that goes into it. Sometimes people are planning 6 months, 9 months for these big banquets. So,
Yeah.
you may end up dropping $50,000 on an event only to raise maybe 200 and you net $150,000.
Yeah.
And if you focus on your top donors who you build relationships with over time, maybe that is a better investment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can hire another staff member for that $50,000,
Yeah.
and they can focus on a portfolio of donors and build relationships and strategies with a segment of your donors who, the 80-20 rule always applies, right?
Yeah.
20% of your donors are probably giving you 80% of your revenue. And the flip as well is a lot of people at the base of your organization, you need that 20% of funding from 80% of donors.
Yeah.
However, it's more valuable to spend time on those 20% of donors as well, right?
Yeah.
And build different strategies for them and engaging them in different ways.
Yeah. So now this all happened how many years ago with ISPU?
Yeah, so I finished undergrad in 2009,
Yeah.
stayed with the university for a couple of months before joining ISPU in 2010. After 2012, I went back to the University of Michigan for my master's in nonprofit management and public administration. Shortly after, literally taking my last exam for grad school, my wife and I moved out to California in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I worked for Tetleaf Collective.
Oh, okay.
And was there for another 2 years. And I did pretty much the same thing I did at ISPU. I was their first full-time development hire, and really brought best practices on building an annual fund and creating more monthly donors and building relationships with their donors across the country. And after working at Tetleaf for 2 years, I joined the American Red Cross from 2015 to 2019, earlier this year.
Yeah.
And when I was at the Red Cross, that's really where I said I want to be more involved with the Muslim community.
Yeah.
And, I had done some consulting work with organizations like Islamic Relief and Indian Muslim Relief and Charities, and Islamic Society of North America, Islamic Scholarship Fund. But after doing a few of those consulting gigs, I really wanted to do something for the entire community overall.
Yeah.
And that's how American Muslim Fund was born, through all of these relationships that I had over the years, and really seeing like there's an issue of sustainability. There's an issue of bringing these best practices to all the Muslim community. And how can we make the fundraising experience and the donating experience a positive one? Right? If you think of like when you help someone, right, you have a really genuine good feeling about it.
Yeah.
Right? Why isn't that the case a lot of the times when we walk out of a fundraising event? We are helping an organization. We're doing such a great thing, but oftentimes fundraising today, especially at events, is inefficient. It's not sustainable. It goes on and on and on. Sometimes it's awkward, waiting for somebody to raise their hand to give $50,000, right?
But what, other than that, I mean, what would you say is, like, there has to be a problem statement, right? When you're setting up a organization or an app even, or anything,
Totally.
what would you say was a problem statement that you would identify?
Back in 2016, there were over 700 community foundations in the country. Some of them are regional, some of them are national, but none of them represented the Muslim community. So, in terms of nonprofit organizations, I wanted to be able to represent Muslim charitable giving. We put such a large amount of our religious identity in zakat, in sadaqah, right? Zakat is mentioned in the Quran over 30 times, and often with prayer. So it shows you the importance and value of it. But how can we then go about making it a more streamlined system of how can we be better stewards of the religious obligation that we have to give this wealth and redistribute it?
Yeah, because for thousands of years, Muslim civilization has always been under an Islamic governance that would be responsible for the distribution of all the funds collected of zakat. Now we don't have that, and people are, doing whatever they want with the 2.5% that they're supposed to give.
And even, I think as more generations of American Muslims are born here, right? My parents, they moved from India to the United States, and growing up, I'm sure they, and to this day, still do give some of their money back home to family in Pakistan and India. And they definitely do a lot here in the United States as well. But I think our generation and the generations to come will have more of an affinity with the United States, right?
Yeah.
And how are we solving issues of homelessness, of food insecurity, of so many things, basic needs
Yeah.
in the local community here.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to represent Muslim charitable giving and the impact that that has on the local community as well.
So you now are you trying to create some kind of a funnel where everyone recognizes one institution that can be the distributors of zakat, or I mean, or is that too high of a goal? You know, is that something that maybe too lofty? Of a goal?
So what we do is we help families identify nonprofit organizations that we've researched and vetted, right?
Okay.
So we will fund any nonprofit organization in the United States as long as they're not a hate group, right?
Okay.
So it's a very broad list.
Yeah.
But any nonprofit can go to our website and apply to be on that eligible list. So over the last few years, we have over 250 nonprofits that have filled out that form, gone through that process.
Yeah.
And the families that we work with, we have 55 families that we help distribute their zakat and sadaqah. And they've given out over $1.3 million in the last 2 years alone.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty fascinating to see just a small group of people and the large impact that they have.
So, okay, now there's going to be many different types of zakat eligible organizations as well. There's not just, charity. Not to diminish any of the charitable work that's done, but there's a lot of them, right?
Of course.
And they're all going to be, probably after this episode, going to be scrambling to your website and setting them up. Now, there's other educational institutions, media companies such as the Mamluks, who are 501c3 nonprofit,
Awesome.
Who are also going to be asking for, not that we don't collect zakat money, but there's going to be there's going to be other organizations that would want to see the benefits of that. How do those funds get distributed equitably?
Yeah, so the families can use a product or service that we provide is called a donor-advised fund. And what this allows families to do is you can put your assets, cash, appreciated stock, whatever wealth that you have, into an account with us. And currently today on the market, you could go to Chase, Fidelity, Schwab, any financial institution. You could find a local community foundation. But again, none of them are going to understand the Muslim community the way that we do.
Yeah.
So that's the value add, that we provide that perspective and understanding of the religious sanctity and obligation of zakat and sadaqah.
Yeah.
So when a family opens up a donor advised fund, they get the immediate tax deduction at that time. And this time of year, some families are looking to donate more to lower their income bracket, or they're looking to kind of strategize how they want to do their donating for the next year, right? Yeah. So the value add of a donor advised fund is you get to take the deduction the moment you make the gift.
Yeah.
Because we ourselves are a nonprofit organization. So we give them the tax receipt at that time.
Okay.
They can hold on to those funds and distribute it the rest of their life. So they can pass it on generation to generation. They can name it after a loved one in memory of someone, have it be a sadaqah jariyah for them.
Yeah.
And then they can take their time to research the causes that they actually want to support. They can still go to a banquet and make a pledge, and we'll help make that donation for them. But it also allows us to bring some projects to those families and say, based on your giving portfolio, we've noticed that you like supporting these types of organizations. Here's another organization that is doing similar work. Would you be interested?
Yeah.
So it allows more of a conversation around charitable giving and the impact that that family wants to make.
Okay. And you said there was about 150 so families who are pooling their resources together into what we know as the American Muslim Fund, right?
Yeah, so right now there's 55 families working.
Okay. 55, sorry.
And we've done this in a short period of time because I just came on staff as full-time earlier this year.
Yeah.
So since 2016, it was very grassroots, right?
Yeah.
And we only had 4 families the first year. But now word of mouth and just people finding out
and
about
this
us.
is all zakah?
So it's both zakat and sadaqah.
Okay, and how do someone who's giving money strictly for zakat, they can allocate their money and like market that this is only for zakat eligible?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll provide you with a report that says, let's say you gave $5,000
Yeah.
and of that, 3,000 is zakat.
Yeah.
Right. We would keep track of that. And then we would say, here are zakat eligible nonprofits that you can distribute that 3,000 to.
Okay.
Or the families will say, we already know which nonprofits we want to give it to. Just make sure that the organizations are vetted and researched by your standards, and then we'll distribute it for them.
Awesome. Yeah. And as can you just go to your website, a Muslim fund, is it?
Yeah, a muslimfund.org.
.org and sign up as one of these donors or
Yeah, so there's we're trying to create like an ecosystem for donors and for nonprofits.
Yeah.
If you look at it that way, the services that we provide the donors are what are called donor advised funds and giving circles.
Yeah.
So the giving circles are where a family of friends they come together and they put their funds in and then decide at a later point which nonprofits to distribute them to. One of the cooler examples of that we do is a family that actually plays fantasy football together.
Okay.
So they put in $500 each, and then the winner of the season gets to determine where the funds go to a favorite nonprofit of their choice.
It's funny because I said that to my fantasy football league because people always don't take fantasy seriously, right? And they're like, they're not vested in it anytime, because whenever you talk to non-Muslims, right, you talk to them and they have all these great stories about how competitive their league is, and half our league is kind of just falling off and giving up on their team. But the difference is that there's money involved in the non-Muslims
Sure.
fantasy football league, and it's gambling. So what I tried to do was I proposed to my friends, hey, let's all pull our money together, and the winner gets to donate the money to a charity of their choice. And all of a sudden, when you mention brown people, money donating to with brown guys, they're like, hang on a second, who gets to determine what is an eligible charity? And all of a sudden, that idea went to
The refs already thrown their flag.
yeah,
right?
it's just got too complicated. But yeah, that was a great idea that you actually pulled it off.
We call it fantasy football for a cause. And this year we had 2 leagues participate. Last year was 1 league. Next year we already have a few people already committed. So happy to coordinate that for you guys. And essentially everybody will put their funds to American Muslim Fund up front. And then at the end of the season, the winner can tell us, give it to this charity. And you can even do like first place, second place, third place. They can do 60%, 30%, 20%, 10%. But then the other idea that some leagues are introducing too is like if your player gets fined, you have to put in an additional like $25.
Okay.
Yeah, so it can get interesting.
Wait, how do you get fined though?
So if their player gets fined by the league.
Oh, by the league.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's like a whole other dimension. That's not
Right.
even a stat that's calculated in fantasy.
Exactly.
I was just thinking. In my fantasy league, I was known for making too many moves. So they had to make a rule because I was
trade deadlines.
Yeah,
and
no,
everything.
there was like a cap on how many moves you can make in the season. So there was like 50 moves that you could make in the season, and I would be like close to 50 halfway into the season because my philosophy with fantasy football was that you had to figure out the best players early on
For sure.
and make the necessary trades and moves early on in the season so you get the best talent early on for pretty cheap. But I get really competitive with regards to that.
And as we should be,
Yeah.
we should be competitive in our charitable giving, right?
True.
And, there's the hadith of the Sahaba who would compete in their charitable giving. And the Prophet ﷺ said, like, what are you doing to support the cause, right? And I believe it was Umar radiallahu anhu and Ali radiallahu anhu. And, he was like, I'm bringing half of my wealth.
Right.
And then Ali radiallahu anhu was like, well, here's all of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like the one time that he
It was Abu Bakr, I think.
Yeah, sorry. So, we have examples of that in in our history. And I think this also provides a good opportunity to kind of focus on like what are some other historical aspects of charitable giving and
Yeah.
the impact that they've made. So one in particular is a sister named Fatima al-Fihriya in the 800s who is known as the Saint of Fez. And she was able to set up the Qarawin in Morocco through a gift. And imagine like the impact that that's had over the centuries, right?
Yeah.
So we have all of these beautiful examples in our history of ways in which people had left gifts, built a legacy, and it was all done in the name of charitable giving, right?
Yeah.
So there's this strong identity, and even when people talk about estate planning, you guys had Ahmed Sheikh on. He was an estate lawyer,
Yeah.
and you can leave a third of your estate to charity before you divvy it up to your family in accordance to Islamic law.
As long as he's not my dad.
So you can think about all of these ways in which you can use your 401k, or the topic of life insurance is gray area, but like you can use those means to help your family and to help the charities that you care about. So there's a lot of convenient and strategic ways that the Muslim community can learn about to take advantage of these systems and laws built in place to help pass generational wealth. Because there's actually a statistic that in the next 30 years, $30 trillion will transfer from one generation to the next. So it's really interesting.
Do you think Muslims in the West are obligated, or not necessarily obligated, but they have a moral obligation to give more than 2.5%, than, especially the upper middle class Muslims, which pretty much is the majority of Asian Muslims, Arab Muslims, who do pretty well for themselves in the West? Do you think it should be maybe 8 to 10%?
I wouldn't necessarily say a certain percentage, but what I would say is like do what is comfortable for your capacity, right? Yeah. Alhamdulillah, there's so many wealthy people in the Muslim community alone.
The problem with that statement is that people say, well, 2.5% is comfortable for me.
Right. What I would argue is that there's enough wealth in the Muslim community to redistribute it to the Muslim causes and even American causes that would be great stewards of their donations.
Yeah.
And Americans in 2018 gave $428 billion in charity.
428
billion.
No.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that number from?
So Indiana University has a report called Giving USA, and each year they analyze charitable giving. So in 2018, it was $427.71 million.
Oh, million.
Sorry, billion.
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 You're sure billion?
Billion with a B.
That's a lot of work for the FBI. Where's all that money going to?
So we have a breakdown. They break it down. So they actually say that 29% goes to religious causes.
Yeah.
And 14% goes to education.
Yeah.
So that giving, 95% of it comes from individuals. So if you think of like outright gifts, it's about 68% comes from individuals, but then about 10% is through planned giving, like bequests and leaving it in your will, right? Then another 18% or so is from foundation. So somebody may have a family foundation set up, right? So if you add all those up, that's 95% comes from individuals. The other 5% is like corporate giving.
Yeah.
So, the rise in popularity of donor-advised funds is also coming to the scene. They've been around since the 1930s. They gained popularity in the 1990s. But last year alone, $30 billion was given to donor-advised funds. And then about $19 billion was distributed from donor-advised funds to other charities. So it's definitely a growing market of charitable giving, and that's why we want to put more importance on this best practice of donor-advised funds for Muslim families to take advantage of. And when it comes to, Muslims in America and donating to charity, I think that in my experience and being a fundraiser in these last 10 years, like I've noticed people giving far more than the minimum of their zakat.
Yeah.
So, I would say a majority of families are doing more than their fair share of what is expected of them when it comes to zakat obligations. And what I would like to see is, we have a long-standing history. We've been talking about like different examples as well, right? So think of Islam in America. It started when they say estimates of like up to a third of the slaves brought from Africa were Muslims, right? And there are historical analysis and reports of women on the in the slave fields giving what were called saraka cakes, and there's like sadaqah cakes, right? And these were rice cakes that they were giving to other people, and that was a practice in West Africa, right?
I thought you said suraka.
Okay.
You know who Suraka is?
No.
He's the guy who was chasing the prophet in the desert when he was going to Medina. Remember when him and Abu Bakr were going to Medina?
Yes.
Yeah. So Suraka was the bounty hunter.
Gotcha.
He was like Boba Fett.
Star Wars comes into play.
I don't know if you ever heard our podcast. I'm a little bit crazy.
Yeah. No, I was well aware what I was getting into.
Awesome.
So this example of the Saraka cakes, right?
Yeah.
And then even there's another freed slave who was named Omar ibn Said, and his biography was written in Arabic, and there were a quote from Surah Mulk of God being the only one who has sovereignty over humans, right? So there's this strong identity between Islam and America that's long rooted, right? And then we see, figures like my heroes of like Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, right?
Classics.
In the 1960s, for sure, right? And pioneers in this space. And then even to today, more heroes like Congresswomen Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar.
Wait, they're your heroes?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk to you later.
So, these people
He knew I won't give him trouble. All right.
So, you see these, and another hero, Mr. Rogers, right?
Yeah.
Grew up on like PBS television, right?
Much better.
There
All
we
right.
go. So
we can agree on that. I like that guy.
So
especially how he changes shoes in the middle of the
when
day.
he walks in, right?
I do that too.
For sure.
I wear boots, so like sometimes I just have to get comfortable and put on some Jordans and relax.
There you go. There you go. So, all of this to say, like, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, ISP, is starting to do more research on American Muslim philanthropy and kind of deep dive into these questions that you have. And what some of the research is also showing, and what American Muslim Fund actually sponsored this report, was looking at the fact that American Muslims are just as likely to give to causes outside of our faith community as well, right?
Yeah.
So whether it is the Red Cross or your local food bank or another cause, you are just as likely to give, but the amount may differ, right? You may be saving your big bucks for an advocacy organization like CARE to represent Muslims, or your local mosque that you attend. But you're just as likely to make a donation to causes outside of the faith community as well.
So I'll be honest with you. Sometimes a lot of skeptical people like me, will look at your organization and say, you know what, I like what he's doing and everything, but I don't want him to have too much control.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there would be a kind of filter towards which organizations get the most money. I think on its own it's fine and it's great, but if it gets too strong or gets too much backing, it can be unfair to other organizations that might be more dependent on some of the sadaqah or zakat funds that are coming. What do you feel about that?
So the beauty of a donor advised fund is it's exactly that. The donor is advising where the funds go to.
Okay.
Right? So you will still be able to say, I like this organization, I want to support that organization.
Yeah.
Our due diligence process is to make sure that that organization is in good standing with the IRS, is not on any government watch list, is not a hate group.
Okay.
So that's our responsibility in making sure that their 990s look good, that they're, making an impact and doing what they say, like they're set
Yeah.
up as a
Okay.
organization to help represent the rights of American Muslims.
Okay.
And they're not doing other work that would steer them away from that mission, right?
Cool. So let's go ahead and take a look at your site and
Yeah, of
see
course.
if some people, if they do decide to go there, what they should or should not do when they go there. So this is the amuslimfund.org.
Mm-hmm.
And once you go to this site, where do you want us to go to?
Yeah, if you're a nonprofit organization, you go to that tab. If you're a donor, you'd go to the donor tab. We actually have webinars and events that we host regularly. So if you're looking forward to learning more about estate planning or charitable giving, you can go under the events tab or see if we're coming to a community near you.
Okay.
So the best place for nonprofits to go to is if you go to the eligible organizations.
Okay.
That's going to be our database of all the nonprofits that we've already vetted. And you can see clearly how much money we've given to them and what focus area the nonprofit works on, other links to their social media or to their website, where they're located. So we try to create this so that you get a one-stop shop of learning more about other causes. And we have been supporting nonprofit organizations in the United States. And we also will work with these nonprofit organizations to build their strategy around creating endowments or waqfs, and also around creating a better practice of fundraising.
What's a waqf?
A waqf is an endowment. So an endowment.
What's an endowment?
Yeah. It is a financial vehicle where families can, or nonprofit organizations can put money into, and then it would be invested. And we invest with Sharia compliant mutual funds.
So you're an endowment.
We are. Yeah. We have our own endowment. We have, and there's, I'd say, over a dozen Muslim nonprofit organizations across the country that do have significant endowments over $1 million. And what that does is the return on investment can go to the operations of the organization.
Oh, I found you guys.
Heyo. And the return on investment can be put back into the endowment for future growth as well.
Okay.
So that's the benefit of that.
So it's describing you as a philanthropy, donor advised funds, giving, circles, endowments, fiscal sponsorship.
Yeah. So we could even get Mad Mamluks on here, right? And
Heck
people
yeah, we're
can-
going to get set up here.
Exactly.
What's the Amazon Watch? Why are they set up here? This looks far.
So it's not the company; it is the Amazon rainforest.
Oh.
So if you look, if you look on the right, it says environmental conservation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Kufar, how many organizations are they in here? Oh, Red Cross. I spotted
That's
them.
my previous employer.
We found them.
They do good work.
Mashallah, they do. What about Red Crescent then?
So it's part of the same movement. Red Crescent is actually the American Red Cross in other countries, right?
Ah.
So it's the same brand and family.
Okay, yeah, we
Yeah.
can't have that Crusader symbol flying in our lands. All right, let's just move on down here. Anything else that you want us to show or see on this?
So
site?
if you go down to Dar al Qasim, and we'll talk about why
Dar al
we
Qasim,
are
our
here.
local.
Yeah.
For those who don't know Dar al Qasim, it is headed by Sheikh Amin
Wonderful man.
Khwaja. He's an eminent scholar from the United States, based out of Chicago. His institute is Dar al Qasim. Many of our guests on the Mad Mamluks are from Dar al Qasim students or graduates or teachers. So our organization is has a very strong bond with that organization. We try to be impartial, and we'll still be impartial if we have to be with regards to Dar al Qasim. But they're amazing people, and it's very hard to say anything bad about them. What is this organization doing here? Heart?
Any organization, as long as they're not a hate group.
Oh, we're going to have to make a case for them being a hate group. I don't like them. All right, let's keep going.
So Dar al Qasim, Sheikh Amin and I have had some conversations about working together to help create more sustainability for the organization. And he created a committee that Akbar Ali was on and tasked with fundraising.
Yes.
So Akbar did a lot of research.
Akbar is my cousin, by the way.
Wonderful.
He's the one who put us in touch.
Yes. Yeah. And he did a lot of research. So he looked at other mainstream institutions like Chase, Fidelity, National Philanthropic Trust that are doing similar work to American Muslim Fund. And he ended up liking what American Muslim Fund was doing.
Yeah.
And we were able to provide also the best rates for our services. And the way that he explained it was, when Sheikh Amin came to the United States, he saw a lot of churches and he saw a lot of synagogues, and he saw that the U.S. was a very devout country, right? And he wanted to make sure that as Muslims in America were benefiting from the U.S. in our education, in our professional lives, in our wealth building for our families, that we were also giving back to the community.
Yeah.
That it was able to nourish this as well, right? So, in Islam, we have the sunnah of giving, we have best practices. He wanted to find the most efficient way to do this. And there's the Muslim tradition that prides itself on giving. And there's a quote about the upper hand is more honorable than the receiving hand, right? So looking at how the community can also support Dar al-Qasim and seeing Sheikh Amin's life's work and how he's building this human talent pool of Muslims who have a basic understanding of Islamic scholarship that's relatable to our surroundings and everyday lives, right?
Yeah.
So being able to sustain that work and that legacy. So what we're trying to do with Dar al-Qasim is help create an endowment and a financial vehicle that will provide more continuity and funding for Dar al-Qasim.
Awesome. What else? Is there anything you want us to see on that site, or maybe you want us to move on to the...
Yeah, if you go over to the donor tab, so go back up. And then, you'll, even if you click on the donors itself, you'll see like the services that we provide. And we talked about donor advised funds and giving circles, and we do research and vetting. So you can get a lot more in-depth information here on the website. And if you're interested in opening a donor advised fund, if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, you'll see these are the steps to do that. So we invite you guys to, streamline your charitable giving. The reason why you would want to open a donor advised fund is you would get one tax receipt. At the end of the year, when you do your taxes next year, you're going to have to collect all of the receipts that you had donated if you're itemizing, right? And you will also be able to invest any money for charitable purposes. So it also provides you with more flexibility on how you spend your charitable donations. This is a good time to mention, the Launch Good campaign that American Muslim Fund has. We, over the last few years, have been operating as a startup, very lean, very focused around re-identifying and perfecting and iterating what services we provide the community and how can we go to a scale-up nonprofit organization, right?
What does that mean?
So we want to create solution-seeking services through our donor advised funds and find more families to open up donor advised funds, find more nonprofits to open up endowments with us, right?
Okay.
If we're able to, say, get to 1,000 families, right now we're at 55, right?
Yeah.
If we're able to get to 1,000 families just based off of the annual administrative fees, we'd be able to be self-sustaining ourselves.
Yeah.
And, you talked about like the Muslim community, the affluence is there.
Definitely.
Right? And even to find 100 or 500 or 1,000 high net worth individuals, or even everyday common families, to take advantage of these services would put us into sustainability, and that would create that scale up model that we're trying to find.
Yeah. And what happens if, let's just say, you have too many organizations kind of setting themselves up over here, and you end up just giving people a dearth of what they should be receiving? Like, you anticipate creating a cap on how many people get set up as recipients on your site?
So the nonprofit organizations, they're not guaranteed funding. But what is then done is if they get approved, we can then pitch their cause to the families. Right?
Okay, gotcha.
So again, the families are directing, they have their budget, they know how much they want to give. But if they're open to learning about new causes, that's when I can go and tell them there's an organization that would be interested in receiving support. And we've seen some success in that model as well.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's fantastic. It's people like there's a lot of organizations that just don't have the resources to even go and approach certain families, and or due to time constraints. I know, like for example, with this podcast, there's just no way I have time to go around talking to donors and stuff like that. It's just a couple people I know. They really have helped set up this podcast, and our monthly Patreon donors who
Of course.
have been giving us a lot of support over the past year or so. But yeah, we don't actually make any money off YouTube though. But most of our, I would say 90% of our videos are demonetized like automatically. They're like, you're just not, we're not advertiser friendly material.
Sure.
So they want like very generic type shows. If we were like talking about electronics or
selling makeup,
selling makeup, Mary Kay stuff, we would be perfectly fine with YouTube. But Muslim stuff is not very advertisable for them, I guess. So anyway, Muhi, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any closing thoughts, any other things that you wanted to mention related to this before we wrap things up?
Yeah, we're very transparent about the money that we fund and distribute. So even on our website, if you go to the About Us and financials, you'll see our social impact update.
Yeah.
You'll see our 990s, and you'll see that we have this commitment to serving the Muslim community, that we want to showcase the impact that Muslim charitable giving can have. And we want to be here so that Muslims can continue to give today and future generations and really uplift the image of Muslims in the community as well.
Yeah.
Showcase that we are charitable, that we are doing this great work, and that we want to create partnerships around families and the nonprofits that they support.
Yeah, it's definitely an amazing cause, and I don't usually do episodes like this, but when my cousin Akbar was telling me about it, I was like, whoa, this is something much more different than what everyone else is doing.
Right.
It's definitely someone who's thinking out of the box, who's seen the traditional model of raising funds and completely reinventing it, right? And I applaud you for it. I applaud you for taking the skills that you've acquired from various organizations and making it your own, and making it something that is a service to the community through that. And that's something that should be encouraged by Muslims everywhere in the West. Just utilizing our professional skills towards the advancement of Muslim causes.
For sure. Happy to be doing it, and thank you for the opportunity. It's been great getting to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. For our listeners, please like this video and comment underneath below if you have any questions for Muhi, and help us out on patreon.com/the Mad Mamluks. Alternatively, you can go to themadmamluks.com/donate and help us out through PayPal. Jazakallah khair. We'll see y'all next week. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.